Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we will call to order. Mr. Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have quorum.
Okay, we have no committee of the whole closed meeting. We have no addeds to approve. Are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we have no presentations, so we will move to delegations. We have two delegations listed in our agenda. First, Chris West, Chair of the Marine Museum of the Great Lakes at Kingston, will appear before Council and speak to Clause A, Report Number 74, received from the CAO Consent, Marine Museum of the Great Lakes, Temporary Relocation and Long-Term Options. And just a reminder that our delegations have 5 minutes to speak. Mr. West. So just before Mr. West begins, so just to remind the audience that unfortunately applause is not in order in council chambers. So certainly appreciate you've come out to express your support, which is great, but I ask you to refrain from clapping, please. Thank you. So Mr. West, the floor is yours.
Mayor Patterson, councillors, in an ideal world, we would not be here tonight. The historic Marine Museum property would not have been sold last January, and the museum would not be facing eviction this coming August 23rd. But we are not in an ideal world. You are politicians, and politics, as often noted, is the art of the possible. The recommendations you have received from city staff are the result of intense and extremely productive discussions between ourselves and your representatives. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Marine Museum of the Great Lakes at Kingston, I fully endorse the report before you. Your staff's recommendations represent the possible, an opportunity to save the museum that I urge you to seize immediately. Nobody wants the museum to close after 40+ years as a potent contributor to Kingston's culture and tourism economy. Your vote for these recommendations will ensure the museum stays open and rises anew in an exciting future. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next delegation this evening is Robert J. Fleming, who will appear before Council to speak to Clause A, Report Number 74, received from the CAO, Marine Museum of the Great Lakes, Temporary Relocation and Long-Term Options. Mr. Fleming.
Your Worship and councillors, I'm delighted to be here. I'm speaking as an individual, and I'm thinking particularly as the background you're visioning process, which I've been very much a part of. I feel that there's a tremendous opportunity to create one entity, and that is the PEN, the new international training school and also the museum in the same element. I have a rather drastic recommendation that probably is a long way down the track, but I think that you should get rid of the new section of the wall which faces west of the Pen. This has to be an absolutely open area. My belief is that the Marine Museum should eventually be placed behind the Pen on the water. In the meantime, I think it should be somehow attached to the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor building. I walk those paths every single day, rain or shine, and I believe that it's going to create a tremendously important function for Kingston to have those institutions together. And I speak from a little experience, having traveled to 52 countries, worked in 52 countries, and also worked in the Antarctic too, and the Arctic. And I believe that this is one of the greatest opportunities that any Canadian city can have, is to do this visioning and to come up with a framework which is satisfactory for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Fleming. Okay, so with that, we have no briefings. Are there any petitions to present? We have no motions of congratulations, recognition, sympathy, condolences, and speedy recovery. We have no deferred motions. So I will ask for report number 74 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Osanek, that report number 74 from the Chief Administrative Officer consent be received and adopted.
So there is just the one clause that is before us, Marine Museum of the Great Lakes, temporary relocation and long-term options. Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I'm very relieved to see this report. The harbor building makes good sense to me. I do have a couple of questions. One is in the financial part of this, there isn't any discussion of the actual cost of the move and what would be needed to allow a museum to be in the harbor building if it needs any special work.
Commissioner Hurdle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So in terms of the, I'll start with the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor. So we have actually had staff go through the space with representatives from the Marine Museum, and we have committed to some small maintenance improvement to the space, but nothing more than that. So anything that that we would be looking at doing in terms of maintenance would be covered through our operational budget, and it's something that would be beneficial to the building as well. And in terms of the actual move and relocation, that's something that the Marine Museum was already working on doing anyway, so it's not something that's being recommended in terms of being funded by the city.
Thank you very much for that. That's very reassuring. And during our discussion today, when we were just talking about the Alexander Henry, the idea of dive tourism came up. And I wonder if you could expand a bit on that, why staff think that an artificial reef out of this ship would be such a benefit to Kingston, because I agree, I think it would be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I did a little bit of research, but didn't have a lot of time. There are definitely a number of diving clubs and different businesses that provide actually diving tours in the area. So from probably Belleville to Brockville area, it's actually quite popular. There are a number of shipwrecks that already are in existence in that area. So from our perspective, this particular artificial dive reef would enhance what currently is existing and would add in terms of our tourism attraction.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your indulgence. I can only go by the events thus far and what I've read in the report. and I can imagine that we can agree, I think that the people of Kingston, the ones that I've heard from in any way, are all speaking with one voice, which is something needs to be done to help the Marine Museum. So I am happy with the work that staff has done on short notice, given the tight timelines, to come up with some constructive solutions. I don't know if it's been mentioned already, but I think that we also have to think of the future and what would happen at the end of the temporary arrangements, and what assurances we can have about the shared costs. And I don't know if this has been asked already, but if it hasn't, what does staff know about the ways that we can ensure that the Marine Museum complies with their end of the deal, I guess?
Commissioner Hurdle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the shared cost that is being proposed, first of all, I want to make sure that it's clear that it would be applicable in the worst-case scenario where we have to dispose of the Alexander Henry. And obviously what we're hoping is that with the assessment, we will be able to bring something back to council which would demonstrate that we can actually turn the ship into an artificial dive reef. And of course, those costs would be presented, and as well as a financing structure. So in terms of the 50-50 split, there are a couple of conversations that we've had with the Marine Museum representatives, and one of them would be that if they don't have all the fundraising done within that time frame, which would be the year time frame, that we could structure a loan with them, and that would enable them to have a longer payback period, if you wish, for that additional funding that the city would have to upfront. Of course, that's something that we would have to bring back to council at that time and for council to approve.
And if circumstances were different in a new location and they were having, I understand that it would be much easier for fundraising purposes to have something to offer. So for the excitement of creating an artificial reef for divers and tourism, that's a positive way to encourage fundraising. But I'm just wondering if they were having trouble sort of raising the funds, would that mean that, you know, that the eventual costs of disposal of the Alexander Henry would lie with the city?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the guaranteed is basically that if the ship has to be disposed of within the next year, so at the end of the year, that right now the 326 would have to be paid. If the Marine Museum didn't have its full 50% share, so $163,000, what we are suggesting is that the city, we would come back obviously to council with a proposal for the city to upfront the difference and structure a loan over a longer period of time, which can be paid back by the Marine Museum, recognizing that $163,000 can be a lot of money, obviously, to fundraise over a one-year period, especially if it's for a disposal versus a tourist attraction.
Okay. So I think definitely the most pressing thing, as it says in the report, is to decide on what to do with the eventual inevitable fact that the ship needs to be disposed of, and there are some cleanup costs involved with that. So I'm happy with the solution supported by staff, and I will support that, proposed by staff. The rest of the puzzle, for a temporary home, I will support it, but I just like to state that from what I've heard from my constituents, most folks think that the museum ought to be at the dry dock. If there's any way that we can continue to encourage dialogue between the landlord and the tenant as an interested third party that we are as the city, I would fully support that and would take direct part if necessary, as I have done in the past. So I look forward to the next chapter, and as I said, the people of my district are all in favor of helping the museum. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, everything in the report is fairly clear regarding where we're going and what the timelines and when we're going to be reported back to. So I appreciate that. The one question I have it sort of stems from some of Councillor Stroud's comments, and that is, what if we can't move the Alexander Henry? What's our contingency there? We've got, in the report, it sort of identifies that we have reason to believe that this is going to be possible. So I just wanted to explore that other path.
Commissioner Hurdle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I can only go by what the experts in terms of being able to move the ship and tow the ship have given us, actually as of early this week, that would have been Monday, is that they've indicated that they have the ability and capacity to move the ship. If for whatever reason that was not feasible, I think we would need to look at, if the water levels become quite important in terms of the actual moving of the ship and towing the ship. So we would have to take that into consideration and see if there would be any other opportunities at any other time during the year before the winter, if that's feasible. And I will tell you that I don't have the answer to that question tonight, but we would also engage in dialogue with the property owner to look at a potential extension as well if for whatever reason it was absolutely impossible to move the ship by August 23rd.
Thank you. Through you to council, I just wanted to express my support as well for this plan. It's come together through a lot of conversations and a lot of thinking, especially when we have started to think about the Portsmouth visioning exercise, Portsmouth and Kingston Penitentiary visioning exercise. There's a lot of good reasons to see alignment between the Marine Museum and the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor, and how they can both benefit each other as well as the Penitentiary Museum and Kingston Penn site altogether. I think that's fairly clear and is a great interim plan while we look to a long-term plan to support and create a safe space for our marine heritage in Kingston. Because it is marine heritage that we're looking to preserve, and Kingston does take great pride in its heritage. There is some risk, as Commissioner Hurdle has indicated, with the Alexander Henry and the relocation, but I think if we want to do great things, we have to kind of take risks here and there, and this is a risk that if we can manage the costs will prevent us larger costs, more difficulties down the road, and I think it's a great opportunity to give us some time to explore how the Alexander Henry might become part of Kingston's great diving environment, because as Councillor Bone mentioned to me, we are one of the great places for freshwater diving in the world, and so let's add to that and let's include that as part of our package in Kingston. So I intend to support the recommendations here in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Yes, thank you. I too fully support the plan that's before us, and it sounds to me, both by way of insurance and other things, that the city, in partnership with the museum, we're doing our due diligence and moving the ship and exploring how we can go about preparing it for freshwater diving as a wreck reef, I think is a really, really good idea. So I totally support the report that's before us. I look forward to the community embracing and including the Marine Museum in the future visioning exercise that will come forward for the Olympic Harbor and the now with the prison as well. So that's an opportunity, I think, for us to do the right thing. And with all due respect to a previous speaker, the idea that somehow the current owner will make the dry dock available and we'll see the light, I think is somewhat naive. That train has left the station. And with all due respect, we had a ticket on that train and we chose not to take it. This is going to cost us money, but it's the right thing to do in order to keep the museum alive. So I fully support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Candon.
Thank you, and through you. I'm going to support this motion. I know that during our time on council, there's been a lot of oh no moments with regards to this file. I don't think everybody or anybody would have chosen the path that it's not an ideal situation, but I think that supporting this motion may be the first time we take this particular account into more of a positive tone moving forward. I think that every change you have in your life, there's different opportunities that arise from it. Change is certainly not something that is easy to embrace, but this could be something that brings some opportunities. And it's been a very difficult case and situation that we've had, but I think that having this in our community is very important, and I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
I certainly will take the chair, and I recognize you.
Thank you. I'm just going to start with a couple of questions for staff. The first question is, do we have any idea of the range of possibility for what the dive reef option might come out to in comparison with the cost of disposal?
So, Mr. Mayor, we don't have that information in terms of the cost of, I'm going to say, cleaning the ship and sinking it at this point. But we recognize that it would obviously be most likely a significant investment that would be required to be able to do that. But what we want to make sure is we get the assessment done so we can report that information back, and we can also have a plan in terms of financing at that point.
And just to clarify, so I see from the recommendation that we have a matching model if, in fact, disposal is the preferred option. But if we do go with the dive reef option, is the intention to work out a similar matching model where there would be contributions from the Marine Museum along with the city?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, that is the spirit of the discussions that we had with the Marine Museum representatives. Certainly, they see that their contribution to an artificial dive facility would be part of the future of the museum, part of what it can offer to those that come to the museum. It's sort of a new life and a new invigoration for that. So we were certainly comfortable with the fact that should a decision be made that we could turn it into a reef, that the museum were definitely committed to a 50-50 partnership on those costs. At this point in time, we don't know if it'll be more or less than the costs associated with the complete disposal of the ship. But we would come back to council with that information within 10 months once we have a plan to go forward along with a financing plan for that.
Thank you. I think that Mr. West said it well, that this is not an ideal situation that we find ourselves in. But in my view, I see this as the best option moving forward. I think that this is really about turning a problem into an opportunity. The problem of the Marine Museum having to relocate into an opportunity to locate it at an area of the city that I think makes a lot of sense towards the vision of of sailing and marine activity and the many other ideas and features that have come forward already in the visioning for KP and Portsmouth Olympic Harbor. When we look at the Alexander Henry, we have a problem, and we're looking to turn it into an opportunity, a way to move it off of our waterfront, to free that waterfront up. And I am certainly cheering for the diving reef option. I think that that would be really cool and would be a great addition to a tourism asset for our city. So I want to thank staff and the Marine Museum for their work in coming to this arrangement. I have always advocated for a joint responsibility, that the city is always willing to partner. We cannot cover all of the costs, but we're willing to help. And in my view, what we have before us is a plan where the community will be called on to contribute. And so as the fundraising call goes out to contribute to that plan, I'm optimistic that the community will respond and will want to support, and then as a city that we can come and we can help to match and to partner for a new vision for the Marine Museum going forward. So I am pleased and happy to support the recommendation. Thank you.
And I will return the chair to you.
Thank you. So if there is nobody else that wishes to speak, we will call the vote on the staff recommendation. And that carries unanimously. We have nothing else on our agenda this evening. Mr. Clerk, I will ask for bylaws.
Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor McLaren, that bylaw 1 be given its first and second reading.
Please vote. And that carries.
Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor McLaren, that bylaw 1 be given its third reading.
Please vote. And that carries. Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Bohm, seconded by Councillor Candon. Please vote. And we're adjourned. Thank you very much.